The idea of this third EP for us, it was, to me, it was the project that was never supposed to happen. I went through this phase, I guess, in my life, this season in my life, where there was a lot going on, and it kind of rocked my world when it came to music. And I reached a place where I just didn't want to do music anymore. I thought that chapter of my life was closing, and I was ready to look for something else to pursue. And before we knew it, we were recording in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. I was writing songs for a new album, and it became something so much bigger than I thought it could ever be.
Doopity doop doop.
Always made of gold. Oh, Lord.
Okay. Maybe you can't even see it in the video.
Okay. My name is Hannah Mahout, and I am the lead singer, writer, guitarist for the band.
My name is Howard Wallace. I play bass.
I'm Brian Blackwell. I am the drummer for Jumping the Gun, and it's been a fun ride.
So we were contacted by a studio out of Boston, and they said that they wanted to do a recording project with us, and they wanted to base everything on crowdfunding, which is something we hadn't done before. Everything we had recorded for our prior albums and projects had been done in our studio, and it was not, it was the best that we could do, but it wasn't in a professional studio setting.
At the beginning, it sounded super cool because it was something we had never done before. Definitely some interesting ways they wanted to campaign and raise money.
The way they wanted to have us come up and record and work with them was basically ask everybody we know for money. And I just wasn't comfortable with that idea. But I really liked the idea of recording in a studio and working with new people.
In the end, I think it didn't line up exactly with what we wanted, and we really wanted to make this album our next greatest thing.
I ended up reaching out to a producer I had worked with before on a prior project that was unrelated to Jumping the Gun. It was a solo project I did, and his name is Marty McClantock. When I reached out to Marty about this, I was just looking for advice, and he told me, to be honest, if you were doing crowdfunding, you wouldn't have to do it with them. You can literally do this on your own. There's a studio that you've worked at before in Muscle Shoals for your solo project. You could take the band here. He offered to even co-produce on the material if he liked it. And so that whole idea became a lot more appealing to me because it was more on my own terms than some company's terms. And we ended up actually recording at Fame and the Nut House in Muscle Shoals. I was just really excited about the idea of taking my team, my crew, up there to record and to experience that, but also to gain a lot of knowledge and direction, guidance from these people that have been in the industry for so long and that are willing to help.
My first thoughts on recording an EP were cool, we're going to get to do another one. Because they're always fun. You never know what you're going to get. The creative process is the most fun.
I feel like for what I was anticipating and expecting for this album, I wanted to challenge myself to go a little bit harder than I have, just because of the circumstances and the opportunities we were given.
I was hesitant because I didn't know what I would write about. I didn't know really where I was even going to go with the direction. Usually for an album, I have kind of a vision, or I have some kind of idea of what I want to do, and for this one I literally had nothing. Obviously you always hope for the best, but I was just completely in the dark, not knowing what to expect for this album.
Being in a band for 8 years, you're always working towards the next thing, and you want it to be better than the last. And I feel like for this album, we were set up really well to make a really good quality recording, something we could be happy with, and really take a step back and just be able to look at it and say wow, that's awesome.
So the writing process for this EP was different than every other project I've worked on, which is really weird because I work the same way just about every time, where like I will get an idea, jot it down, come back to it later, start writing, and before I know it, it's a song. For this one, I literally came to the table with nothing. I just kind of sat there with my notebook, my pen, my guitar, and I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And it would start off with like a riff or something like that, and then maybe I'd come back to it, or maybe I'd sit there and do an entire song and finish it the whole way through. I sit there and just wait, and then it comes and I write, and then it's done, and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? We have a song now. And that's how the songs for this EP were written.
The music was definitely, I wouldn't say similar, like she definitely throws us for some loops sometimes, but one thing I love about the writing is that it's always something that I can listen to and like hear what I want to play, and that's one thing I've been grateful about, is just the freedom to be able to make the song my own in terms of drums.
So Bad Behavior, that was the first song that I wrote for this album, which ended up not only being like the title track, but like the title of this EP. Because it was the first one and it was so energetic, and I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like rock to me. And that really excited me because I wanted so badly to get, I wouldn't say back to our rock roots, but I grew up on rock, and that's where like I feel the most energy from. And so as soon as I wrote that song Bad Behavior and I felt the energy from it, I was like, oh, I cannot wait to see what comes next for this album. Bad Behavior talked mostly about not being able to control yourself, but in a different way, not necessarily with your words, but just overall, you can't get away from yourself, you can't get away from your head, you can't seem to get anything right, and it's frustrating, and you feel like once you've hit that rock bottom, you're like, how is it still getting worse? That was like just a wild cry to get away from yourself in that song.
I am Tyler Suggs, and I play lead guitar in the band Jumping the Gun. And I joined Jumping the Gun in about January of this year. So for my first impression of the songs from the new EP, I really, really liked them. And normally I do that with a lot of albums that I listen to, where if it's a new album, I'll listen to it, and then I either feel really good about it, or I just kind of place it into a category of every other song that I listen to, or every other band that I listen to. But with this, I got really excited listening to the songs.
Bite My Tongue, I think that was the second one that I ended up writing. It started off with the riff. I don't know, I liked the riff. It fit the vibe of what I was trying to say, and then the lyrics started coming on top of it, the melody, like it just all came kind of naturally. Bite My Tongue talks about a lot of regret, a lot of guilt, just by saying things that you regret, and always feeling trapped by your words because you're trying to help somebody, or maybe you're not, maybe you're just, a casual day, you say something and then you hurt somebody and you offend somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get anything right. Bite My Tongue, the way the music was orchestrated and everything, it gives that kind of chaotic feel.
What I put into it, it's really hard to say because it just seems to happen.
Made of Gold took a completely different direction. This one was not planned to be on the album until last minute. I just sat at the piano and wrote the song. And I sat down and I played it. And then I sang it. And I was like, okay, now I gotta write it down. And that was the song. It wasn't something I had to think about or hesitate about at all. And by the time I was done writing it, I was like, wow, this is a really big song. I don't know if this is gonna fit the album at all, because it was a totally different tone. But when I had started talking to Marty about what he wanted to do for this album, he said he wanted to have at least one showcase song that really, showcased my vocal. And I was like, well, I have this song, Made of Gold. It doesn't fit necessarily, in my opinion, the vibe of the rest of the album that's very high energy, but it does showcase, a voice and everything. And so that's how that song kind of ended up becoming on this album. So don't give up and don't let go. Made of Gold, the meaning behind that was very deep and very personal to me. It talked about my experiences of seeing friends, family, people that I care about really struggle to find their worth or struggle with addiction, mental illness, whatever it is, and not being able to find the words to say. For a long time, I had a lot of guilt, not knowing what to say to these people that would come to me with these dark, heavy thoughts. And I mean, those are things that I've experienced myself too. But even that, I didn't even have the words for myself. It's so heavy and it's hard to see the light in those moments. And I just felt guilty because I never knew what to say other than like, I'm sorry. And when I went to go write this song, it was like a huge relief and a weight off my shoulders because it felt like finally I had found the words that I would want to say to somebody. And I had so much peace, but also heartbreak. It was a weird, bittersweet thing because, man, it just brought up a lot of memories of people hurting, and it was hard to listen to. But overall, I was very happy that I had kind of had that relief after writing that song. When it came to writing Talking with the Devil, I feel like this is the one musically I struggled with the most. I had this vibe that I wanted in the beginning of it being very sing-songy, storytelling, fairy tale-ish. I don't know how to explain it other than that in the beginning, and then I just wanted it to rip open with guitars and like the emotion of the guitars and the instruments all coming in. Basically wanted it to take that fairy tale and just like tear it in half, but musically. And it was kind of hard to figure out how I was going to capture that, and it was hard to communicate that with my co-producer Marty. It was a little bit more tricky to write, but I loved the melody and everything still came together pretty well when it was just me writing myself. And I remember there was the bridge of this song, I had not figured out what I was going to say. I knew it was going to be fast-paced and it was going to be like in your face. There was one practice that we had and everybody was getting ready to come over to the studio, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to show them this song like tonight. I want to, showcase it, start working on it, but I still hadn't had the words. So I sat down at the desk, and while people were coming in and loading in for practice, I was like quickly just like writing words down that were coming so fast. They were like talking to me and I was still like just writing, and it just worked. It worked, and that's the song.
When we first sat down and we fleshed out the idea, it just didn't seem like it was even going to be a song. And that one actually had the easiest flow out of all the songs on the album.
This is probably the only major song on this album that talks about relationships. And it's not even necessarily, I don't want to expose the meaning too much of my songs because I want the music and the lyric to be able to translate to the listener, however that needs to translate. But for me, this wasn't like a breakup relationship type thing. It was more of just like putting your faith in someone and opening up to someone, believing that they truly want to help you, and realizing in the end that they don't.
The parts that I had with the drums, some of it came pretty easily. Other parts definitely did not. There was a few times in the studios where we would, work through the same part 15, 16, 17 times, and just my brain could not get wrapped around it. But we ended up getting it. I feel like most of the album, for the main parts of the songs, it went pretty smoothly, but we definitely had a lot of stuff. Like I said, I wanted to challenge myself, and I really feel like I did.
Better in a Straitjacket. That was another one that I just sat down and I just started playing and writing, and it came. That one had a lot of meaning, so by the time I was done with it, I was like, whoa, this is a song that's bigger than me and bigger than what I could have expected. I wouldn't say it was the hardest one to write, but it was the hardest one to for me to listen to. I don't know, I wrote the song and I sat back and listened to it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this song is definitely about me. I know that's weird because you wrote the song, right? I don't even know how to say it. It's like you're preaching to yourself. And so that was a hard thing too. The song talks about literally wanting to be so good for the people around you, your loved ones, and you're trying your best and you are just like giving it your all, but you still, you know that you hurt people all the time. And so you feel better in a straitjacket, you feel safer in a cell. Man, it was a hard song to get through, and I still, listening to it today, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's me.
The way I felt about the songs after we really got them nailed down in the garage was happy. I think everything has been expressed the way it should be.
Once the lyrics were written, I realized how impactful it was, at least for me, and that the story each song was going to be telling was significant. I definitely did feel like I connected with each song, probably more so than I have ever before. Obviously, I write my own music, so I connect with it, you know, at a certain level. But with these songs, it was even more personal than it had been before. It was a hard thing to write something that I was still struggling with, like talking about these battles that you have to get through in life and you're still going through it. It's not like, oh, hey, I made it out on the other side. Because I was still going through it, it made it that much more significant. I feel like each individual song played its own part, but at the same time, they all came together to create this EP for Bad Behavior that really, when it's all put together, it makes sense. So typically when we write new material, I will have like a rough idea for the music, and I'll show the guys in the band like, hey, this is a new song, and they'll listen to it, and I think it's probably maybe like a time or two, and they eventually, like, they have their parts, they figure it out, and it works out so well. Once we had the general idea of what we each wanted to do for the song, we decided to record the demos and then send them off to our co-producer, Marty. And I was even more nervous about that because I'm comfortable sharing my songs with the band because I've done that, you know, my whole band career. But sharing it with somebody else that's also going to be, you know, critiquing it and putting their voice on it, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. But when I did give them to Marty, I think he really liked them and he started really taking off with some great ideas, which made us even more excited. Pre-production is where you are working out everything before you go to record in studio. Typically when you're recording in studio, it's a thing where you're kind of paying by the hour, so you want to be ready to go and ready to record as soon as you walk in the door. So pre-production allows you that time to work with your producer, your lyricist, whoever it is that you're working with, and hash out all that material. So we did our pre-production at, I think it's Concussion Corner Studio, which is a studio in a guy named Rudy, his basement. I know it sounds creepy, but it's actually a really, really cool studio. It's very well put together. I think the most significant memory I have from the pre-production period was when we were talking about Bite My Tongue with Marty, and he started playing the opening riff that I had written for this song. He started playing it over the chorus, and he's like, this is how this is going to sound, and I think this is a good fit. And I was absolutely blown away. I never would have put that together, and we were all super excited to really start recording this song.